Hello and welcome to this special interaction. I'm Gautam Roy, and the person I'm speaking with today has been a career bureaucrat who's worked over the decades very closely with commerce ministers, finance ministers, prime ministers as well, and he's fulfilled other capacities. He's been a member of parliament in the Raj Sabha, the upper house, and what's more, he's just submitted the 15 Finance Commission report as well. Yes, you've guessed it by now. Perhaps it's N.K. Singh. And the reason we're speaking to him today is because he's condensed the wealth of all his knowledge and experience into, 400 odd pages, slightly over 400 pages, and that's in his memoirs. And it's called Portraits of Power, Half a Century of Being at Ringside. It's just come out, and we have N.K. Singh with us today. Welcome to DD India. Now, your memoirs are also to a large extent about India's journey down the reforms road and the role its institutions have played in the governance process as well and India's progress. Now, has this journey been a natural one, evolutionary progress, or do you feel that there have been some fits and starts because of some things just hit our policymakers out of the blue and then they had to just react?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. In my view, you always require a new momentum and a new cause for action. My book has brought out that if you look at the earlier period of India's post-independence history, in a largely regulated economy, in the initial years, we were struggling for food, we were struggling for foreign exchange. We were struggling to keep India's reputation intact and its independence jealously preserved. Thereafter, we went through a long period in which these remained the primary emphasis in seeking food sufficiency. That was a period when the Planning Commission was trying to ensure that the allocation of resources were optimum enough to be able to secure these efficiencies of various kinds. But in the process, we encountered numerous difficulties. I mentioned one in the book where in 1990, in a certain period of our history, following our devaluation, Mrs. Indira Gandhi at that time had felt betrayed by the Western powers going back on commitments which they had made. We went into an over-regulated economy, resulting in low rates of economic growth. We also had bouts of what I call fiscal profligacy. And if you look at India's balance payments history, you will find that India's recourse to additional borrowings from multilateral institutions and from bilateral borrowers have followed a few years of fiscal profligacy. Indeed, these were the immediate proximate causes for the 1991 economic crisis. A couple of years of fiscal profligacy before that, the Kuwait War, the collapse in the remittances of that period, and these led to the full-blown balance payments crisis when preventing a debt default was our important challenge. But we took this challenge head on. The Prime Ministership of P.V. Narasimha Rao, and supported by the Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, undertook what was known as the far-reaching economic reforms of 1991. This freed up the Indian economy very substantially, and we never looked back to a period of foreign exchange crisis thereafter.
Let's talk about the prime ministers now. You worked, of course, closest with Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, but there was Dr. Manmohan Singh as well when he was finance minister for P.V. Narasimha Rao, and you're very familiar with the way the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi works. Now, they were all very different individuals, different styles of functioning, but in terms of your own view of how effective leadership has evolved in this country, how do you feel things have gone, they have progressed, or it's just that each prime minister has been a prime minister of his own or her own circumstances?
Let me say each prime minister have expectations and aspirations of their own, which are designed and circumscribed by the challenges of the time. I will trace just a few prime ministers. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's biggest challenge was the balance payments crisis and how to prevent the fair reputation of India not becoming a country of a debt defaulter. That was his principal challenge. And that challenge he addressed remarkably by the iconic reforms of 1991, for which Dr. Manmohan Singh, as the finance minister, gave him very able and imaginative support. That was a different kind of an era which he passed through during the period of Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao. The government of P.V. Narasimha Rao thereafter had, apart from the changes, was followed by a period of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who served for a reasonable period of time. His expectations and vision was to transform India into an important entity on the global high table. He took the audacious decision, which I have pointed out, of the nuclear explosion, which at that time was questioned by any. Sanctions were imposed. He acted with audacity and with panache. No doubt the fact that the economic reforms of 1991 had improved India's economic strength enabled him, but the fact remains that he acted with audacity. And that really positioned India as an important member on the nuclear high table. He coupled this with some very far-reaching steps, recognizing that technology has a power, and therefore the telecom revolution, which had got stymied, to feed up the telecom sector. He realized the importance of connectivity in this country, and the National Highway Development Program. We have better roads today than we had ever thought of, was a vision of Prime Minister Vajpayee. So it is a combination of audacious political step and important economic reforms. And finally, Vajpayee had the great ability of being a great consensus builder. One of the things I recall about him is his great sense of humor, his ability with one smart comment to lighten the atmosphere, which enabled decision and consensus making to be facilitated. That followed a period of 10 years of the UPA government, and their challenges were somewhat different, of consolidation. On the economic front, I do not see very important steps, although there were initiatives which were taken, but they did make amazing progress in terms of improving our strategic partnership with the United States. The nuclear deal was transacted during that period, which has been commented upon. And then, of course, we have the period of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his second term. Now, he has a different vision altogether of not only making India into an important global power, but of using the power of technology, of giving India an inclusive growth. The audacious steps, for instance, which I have mentioned, of inclusiveness, of the Jan Dhan program, of direct benefit taxes, of using increasing technology, which will enable you to do agricultural productivity, improve it significantly, in health, in education, in infrastructure, sectors which were comparatively ignored earlier. In terms of some important decisions like the GST and Banking Bankruptcy Act. So I think that vision of Prime Minister Modi of making India not only domestically prosperous, but an important global power is something which is driving the creativity and urge of his current initiatives.
The last chapter of your book, which is the pandemic and beyond, you've talked about the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and also the health sector. So just tell us, in your assessment, do you feel enough has been done by the government and other stakeholders to ensure that our country bounces back from this sort of a shock, a catastrophic event, that it has got, it's resilient enough? Has that been done?
Well, let me say that the response of the Indian leadership under the Prime Minister has been one of alacrity and vision. Alacrity in terms of the speed at which the leadership responded to the enveloping factors of the pandemic. First and foremost, the issue of life. He took the courageous step of announcing a lockdown which has been far more significant than any other country has done. It was an 85 to 87% lockdown. And some of the outcome of the Q1 result, about which much was made of, was a consequence of that great lockdown in the interest of life. The second area where he acted with alacrity is the area of livelihood. Livelihood in terms of taking care of the large outflow of the migrant population, which took place in terms of the free distribution of enhancing the public distribution system, free availability of rice and dal for several months. And then in the third phase, in terms of the economic revival package, a revival contingent not only in terms of the direct fiscal stimulus, in terms of the additional money which was put in, for instance, that was put in through direct benefit transfers, through enhancing the Jan Dhan account, through other modalities towards more inclusive growth for rural India, enhancing the quantum for the Manrega employment scheme because they needed employment. But apart from the direct fiscal impetus, the activities of the central bank acting in tandem with the fiscal policies of the government, the policy of forbearance of the central bank, congruent with the policy of stimulus of the central government, represents, in my view, a visionary, far-reaching leadership addressing the issues of the current pandemic and the economic reforms which have been undertaken, ensuring that over the medium term, we not only recover, but we can have higher growth trajectory.